House of Commons is a disgrace. Galloway furious middle-class lefties wrecking Brexit. The former politician argued that he would not change his mind on Brexit and that those who are wavering should just look at those negotiating on the EU's side. He said, "The current House of Commons is a disgrace to anything called Parliament." A collection of the au pair tendency and The Guardian was lamenting this very week how Brexit was going to make it very difficult for those looking for au pairs. They speak of little else in Dagenham. They speak of little else in East End of Glasgow, but the au pair tendency, the Chablis tendency, were out in all their ugliness this week in Parliament. Trying to wreck a decision made by 17.5 million people for Britain to leave the European Union. I tell you, if you are in any doubt over whether we should be leaving the EU, just take a look at the people that we are negotiating with, and just take a look at the fifth column inside our own parliament, inside our media class, who are trying to wreck it. You turn if you want to. I am not for turning. It follows an appeal to ministers to back moves to abolish the House of Lords by Labour MP Frank Field. Mr. Field, one of a small group Labour MPs to campaign for leave in the EU referendum, has tabled a bill in the Commons calling for the Lords to be scrapped and replaced by a smaller Senate with limited powers to delay or amend legislation. The move comes after peers voted for a second time for an amendment to the EU withdrawal bill, giving the Commons a meaningful vote on a final Brexit deal after it was rejected last week in the lower chamber. Without government support, the House of Lords, abolition and replacement bill faces little prospect of even being debated by MPs, let alone becoming law. However, Mr. Field said he would be urging ministers to allow it to be debated by the Commons in government time. He argued there was widespread anger among the public at what he said were the attempts by the Lords to thwart the will of the voters and prevent Britain leaving the EU. He said, "I shall lobby the Prime Minister and the Leader of the House, Andrea Leadsom, for the government to give us time to get it through. Why shouldn't the government do something popular? The Lords needs to be reformed. We rarely do reform unless there is urgency of needs. Here is the urgency of needs." Downing Street said the government had set out its position on Lords reform earlier this year when the Prime Minister called for restraint in the appointment of new peers following proposals to reduce the size of the upper chamber.